Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this episode, we're going to take an image that looks like this into this. Now, this was a paintover that I did for one of my students at my mentorship. And the whole idea behind this process is how we can push an image further. And so I'm going to try to break it down into simple tasks in order for us to progress through the image. But let's take a look. Okay, so let's get started with this by taking a really good look at this. And I'm gonna apologize, my voice is a little weird. I've been battling with some congestion and sinus, so I might be coughing a little bit. But when I get to a point where I sort of don't know how to proceed with the image, how to push it further, I always take a step back, and instead of ignoring it and moving into something, I always try first to really try to decipher what's really bothering me about the image and what's really wrong with it. And it doesn't have to be big things, right? It could be very simple things. And so I'm going to go around here and I'm just going to mark some things that I think we can start addressing, right? And, no matter how big or small they are. And a lot of times fixing those little things will be very beneficial to our image itself, right? So just a few things, right? First, I'm gonna see it in black and white just to kind of see, right? And I can already start telling that, there's a little bit of a value, sort of too much contrast in certain areas, like here, right? I do want the contrast to be in here because this is going to be my focal point of the image. And so I'm also noticing that, we have this very big crystal and these smaller crystals, right? And I can see light emanating from these smaller crystals, right? Like I can see the light on the ground, right? But we don't really have anything coming from this really big one here, right? And maybe this spotlight is coming from here. It's a little bit confusing there, right? But I can see, if I go back to black and white, that I have these pockets of light here. And I want to make sure that I bring that light coming from the main crystal, right? And I think you can still have the sort of spots around from the light coming, but we want to be careful with how we do that as well, right? And so that's one of the first things that I'm noticing. Other thing is, like, for example, this right here is getting a little bit confusing with, I know because we have talked about this. This is probably like sand coming down, right? And then we have this God ray slice coming in this direction, which is a little bit confusing. So we have to make sure that this here reads as sand, and then these right here reads as light. The other thing is that when you have this type of situation on your images where you have a hole or some sort of opening in like an underground, which this is what it looks like, right? Like an underground sort of cave forest. You want to make sure that you have a representation of how thick this is, right? Because right now it reads as a very thin layer of whatever this material is, right? And so if I look at it in a 3D way, I have the sort of ceiling going in this direction, and then there's like just a little bit of bevel or edge in there where it's gonna make it very thin. It's not very sort of realistic, right? We want to have some sort of thickness into that. So I want to see the same material going up in here, right? Like if this was a cylinder here, right? And the cylinder sort of goes up, right? And you can still have that light coming down, right? You might have in a different direction, but we want to see the thickness of this material that we have here. That's going to bring it a little bit closer to a little bit more realistic, more believable situation here instead of just having like a really thin layer like that. So that's another thing. I'm not super worried about the colors. I think colors we can always change. My main concern is that that's just the values. I want to make sure that the values read a little bit better, right? So for example, if I see this sort of, if I see this sort of tree-like element here, which is sort of like in the foreground here, right? These right now has the same sort of range of value as the ones in the back here. And so it's flattening everything in here by having the same range of values, right? And so we want to be able to push this one towards the camera, right? And then everything back here should be pushed away from the camera, right? And so that's one of the things that I'll probably address at the very beginning, right? But I want to make sure that I take note, right? And so we have 1, 2, 3, about 4 or 5 things that we know we can fix fairly easy, right? That is simple to understand. And that's how we can start pushing this to a higher level or to read better, right? By doing those little adjustments. We don't really have to think about everything as a whole, right? Because sometimes that could be very overwhelming. And sometimes we just have to break down those little things, right? And then tackle them one by one and fix them and then see how that looks and then take a next step and then a next step, right? And so let's start working with it, right? And I'm gonna work with what I have here. I'm not gonna do any photo batching right now. I do want to take this a little bit further. I want to treat it sort of like a still, like a sort of like a mood sort of painting, right? Not very detailed. If I were to work this to a very final, I'll probably do a lot of work in the 3D, just because I can adjust things a lot faster and better. And so, but I want to work with this, and I think the first thing that I want to do is sort of work a little bit the colors. Now, if you like this content, make sure that you check out our World Builders Workshop platform, where we have a lot of courses covering, world building, environment design that goes really into details about the techniques and the principles of building a whole environment. We're also working on bringing some other courses for, character design and some other aspects of world building. But make sure that you check the website out. It has all the information about all the courses that you can get lifetime access to, and they're very structured as well. So make sure that you check those out. Just because right now there's so much fighting from the colors, and again, I don't want to talk too much about coloring here, but I want to dull them just a little bit. And then we can bring back some of the colors, right? Again, colors could be anything, right? As long as my values are good. And so the other thing, I want to get rid of these rays for now. We can add them later. And the same thing with the openings in the ceiling. Right now, my main concern is to really try to fix the values as much as possible. So I'm going to roughly grab there. Let's grab this guy. Let's put it in its own layer. I'll do the same thing for the for the crystal here. This is going to be probably our most important element. Let's put it on its own layer. I'll grab these crystals as well. And what I'm trying to do is sort of separate the background from the middle ground and from the foreground as much as possible, right? Again, with the 3D, this will be a lot easier. So let's do that. Let's have that there. Right, so I have my main tree here, have my crystal, I have this, and then my background here. Now we can always separate the background even more and more layers, but for now let's worry about this, right? And so I'm gonna start adjusting some of the values. So we can maybe, and again, you can do a, whenever I think about separating and working my values, right? I try to do it in very simple ways, right? This might be something where, this might be a setup where maybe the background or the foreground is dark, the middle ground is bright, and then my background is sort of like mid-tone, right? It could be something where my background is dark, my middle ground is sort of like in the mid-tone and then bright here, but I think this is going to read sort of something like this a little bit better. And again, I want to simplify my values as much as possible. I know we have those pockets of light somewhere in the ceiling here, but we're going to worry about those later. And a little bit of atmosphere here just to kind of separate that from the rest. Now, again, I don't know why you have the choices of color that you have, right? Because you have this green sort of happening in the background. And then the red and the green here from the crystal. The other thing I'm going to add very roughly here right now is the light coming from the main crystal here. And it's also illuminating sort of the crystals as well here. As you can see, I'm not worried about textures or anything. I sort of want to get the values read correctly, right? For example, if I bring the old one, I'm gonna start bringing more attention to that center, right? And then we can slowly start adding the other elements of the story. Slowly. It's painting a little bit here on this. I'm not gonna go super into like actual painting materials and all that. That's like another conversation. You can see how simple I'm trying to separate everything that I have in here, right? Thinking that even maybe we can bring probably this foreground element even closer to the camera. We can use that opportunity to separate even more using the values and the light coming from the crystal to separate that character. from the background. I'll probably make this character smaller. Just so we can make this place a little bit more epic and big. As you can see, I'm putting all my attention right now at the main focal area, right? I'm not even worried about all this stuff in the back right now. Because I want to make sure that this area here sort of reads correctly first. And then we can sort of worry about that, about the rest of the stuff. A little bit more there. We can play with the placement of that character later. And the scale of it. We could probably have some really nice full shadows, sort of like what you have here already. It's gonna be nice. A little bit of that light there. Everything that has some sort of surfacing here is gonna get maybe a little bit of a highlight there in that cast shadow sort of coming from there, right? But now let's compare. Let's go back to the black and white, right? And I'll probably, let's work a little bit the crystal here. I'll probably make it a little bit more threatening with some spikes or something like that. Or like it's growing down. I want to pay attention to the values of it, right? Of the different materials. Want to also make sure that, that I'm trying to bring that shape of this crystal to be a little bit more interesting. Again, this is something that I'll probably just do in 3D, but just so you can see. see a little bit through the material into the crystal there. Right? And so let's take a look at it black and white, right? And compare. Right? And so now that I have some progress on how the image is reading, right? A little bit more clear. Now we can start adding some of the stuff in the back, right? Without compromising what we already did. And so we can definitely work with what we have, right? I think there's plenty of information here, right? Well, the thing that I don't want to do is, let's say I grab this and then I start doing, this sort of thing, because now there's so much contrast happening right now that it's just going to take away from the main area. I could go a little bit darker, right, in certain areas, right, which is not really adding too much contrast, but is accentuating the whatever texture this is, right? And I won't do it everywhere. I just do it in certain areas because my brain is, I see it here, right? And as I look around the image, it's gonna start adding those details by itself, right? I don't need to worry about having it all the places. If I go back to black and white, it still reads the same way, right? Yeah, we have a little bit more detail, right? But you can always push back a little bit there. And probably one thing that I would do is I will bring some of this thing happening back here closer to the camera so we can actually have a repetitive design aspect. And that way, it's easier for our brains to sort of make that connection, Again, this is a lot easier to play with in 3D, but so slowly we're gonna start bringing it, together. Again, I'm not sure what these things are over here. Something to really think about. Maybe it could be one of those holes or something. I'm not sure. Merge this. Let's keep our life a little bit simpler by just merging certain things here. I'll take the character out for now. And so depending on how you want to render your image, right, you can use photo batching, whatever the case may be, right? It really doesn't matter, depending on what your desirable final look you want to be. Now this thing is bothering me, so I'm just gonna get rid of it. Not exactly sure what they are, so I'm just adding a little bit of texture back here. Just gonna add a little bit more suggestive detail. No big deal. I could use, just to add a little bit of detail, I could use custom shapes, for example. There's some custom shapes here that maybe could work. Just gonna add a little bit of detail here and there. Back to the background. Maybe add some details here. Oops. Let's go back black and white. Compare again. All right. So, now that I have established, and we could put the character there if you want right now. That's probably going to be a last minute thing that I'll probably add. Oops. But, oops. What I want to do is probably want to add more detail to this just so I can push it just a little bit more. But I want to, the main thing is I want to keep the general read of this as a black and white image, right? I don't want to disturb that. So whatever details I add is just going to enhance whatever I have right now, right? And so I'm going to bring some pictures and play with the actual image just to see how that looks like. And then we'll see how it goes. And I'm bringing some pictures here, maybe just to kind of play like this one because of the lights. Usually play with the blending modes first. Just kind of see what I get. Now, this is a cave, so there's really not a lot of light happening here. So want to be extra careful. The other thing I want to do is let's get rid of this. I'm gonna bring some curves, and so I'm gonna unify a little bit of the values, just a little bit. Let's do that there. Now let's start bringing some images here. So I always play with the blending modes first. See what I get. And this doesn't need to be, again, I'm treating this image sort of like a quick concept, just to kind of get the general feel first. Like, this is not going to be a fully render thing. And so there's a lot of experimentation and freedom for me. Ooh, that's kind of cool, actually. It's like not lava, but maybe some underlight happening down there. Maybe I could change the color to the color of the just gonna test that out. Really like that texture there. Kind of cool. Again, this may not be exactly what you had envisioned, right? But right now I'm just really just playing with the image just to kind of see how I can push it. And maybe this will spark some ideas for new things, right? That we just don't know. I want to be very subtle with this, right? Been looking at some other images, and maybe we can bring some like images like this, which will have that light coming through. And this might be too much, right? But I'm gonna see. Because we don't need this part here. Still unsure about this, right?